Hi. I just wanted to kind of go over again the midterm and just kind of thinking about what you need to do in order to prepare for the midterm. So, we're going to be looking at Faulkner and we're reading A Rose for Emily. So, just a couple of things to think about. Notice the quote here. And we had talked in class about the noblesse oblige without calling it noblesse oblige. So we're thinking about the kind of structure of the Old South and the way that Emily is representative of a kind of archetype of a woman in that cultural landscape. At first, we were glad that Miss Emily would have an interest because the ladies all said, of course, a Grierson would not think seriously of a northerner, a day laborer. Still, there were others, older people, who said that even grief could not cause a real lady to forget. Don't forget who you are, your noblesse oblige, without calling it that. They just said, poor Emily. Her kinsfolk should come to her. And then it talks about these kin that she had, but it really is sort of like this sort of breakdown of society that Faulkner is thinking of. So we kind of go with here we have this communication between the two families, right? So this sort of breakdown of the family. The story itself is on pages 432 to 439 in the book. So we want to think about reading it in the actual textbook, but also just some questions to consider. What is the noblesse oblige and why does it matter? Why is it ironic that everyone is saying poor Emily with regard to Homer Barron? And who's guilty of this terrible violence? And how does Faulkner use that violence to frame a criticism of the South? So just sort of thinking about like why tell this story, right? What's he getting at? Why is the story so canonized? If we think about the close reading of the story, we kind of remember, as we said in class, that there are the literal, the inferential, and the evaluative. So the college level response is sort of that last one. What's beyond the lines? What is the writer saying about society in general? So we kind of go through all the different elements. If you recall, we have this form that I had put out a few times, right? We kind of go through who's the title, what's the title, who's the author, things to know, what kind of genre is this. And all the way on the right side, we have over here, this is what is beyond the lines. What's the bigger question that the author is trying to answer? How is the title about death coming for everyone? And posthumously, why is Faulkner considered a great writer? So it was really just because he was writing sort of ahead of his time. He was criticizing the Old South. He was characters representative of this kind of dying breed of people. And the cultural context here is that the Old South is not really important anymore. So we get that, right? This here, where it's like, this is old, it's done. Faulkner had really talked about Reconstruction after the Civil War and why these people are done. Why is white privilege over? Right? So he's really ahead of his time if you think about it. We talked about the significance of the we, right? Why is the author using the second person pronoun? And this is really key if you think about it. I was saying it's like, when your grandmother tells you a story and she says, we came in through the airport and I had never seen that many cars. And then we went to the restaurant and you can just get a big plate of food. Like we're sort of thinking about this like significance of telling a story in that way. And what Faulkner's really saying is that the social life of a small town is very important in the South. We can't imagine it maybe because we grew up in these big towns on Long Island, or, we can't imagine like a town with like 150 people. Right? But what he's really saying is that somebody is always watching. Someone is always watching. It's a very interesting idea if you think about how far ahead. He makes up this place called Jefferson, and there's this whole thing about this here where it's like from that time on, the door remained closed, right? So Emily just becomes, this sort of tragic figure with her little watch. And there's the ticking of the watch, right? So the doors remain closed, right? We don't really know what's going on in that house. But here's the house. So you can imagine this house. Maybe you've seen houses like this. There's a kind of romanticism, but really what Faulkner's talking about is this sort of broken down cupolas and the spires and the balconies of the 1870s. So you can imagine up here, which is sort of like this kind of, this is known as the widow's walk, right? It's like a way that you can sort of walk around on the roof. Some other things to think about: the characters, who's the protagonist, who's an important figure here. Um, Emily Grierson is sort of representing oppression and the lack of choice in the Old South. For the sheriff, he's complicit, right? He sort of violently has to break down the door on page 438. But he's part of it also. Colonel Sartorius is sort of Faulkner's description of why Southern women no longer have protection, right? Emily's father and the death of the father is signifying that the Old South has died. And then we have this ironic ending, right? We have this end of the story, which we read in class. And it's so spooky. We have this. Here we go. Think about our sense of culture and identity. And everyone's feeling sorry for Emily. And then we get to the end of the story. There's so much death in that last couple of pages, right? And so she died. She fell ill in the house filled with dust and shadows, where only a doddering Negro man to wait on her. We didn't even know she was sick. We had long given up trying to get information. He talked to no one, probably not even to her, for his voice had grown harsh and rusty. And then we have the end of the story. Then we notice that the second pillow was the indentation of a head. One of us lifted something from it, and leaning forward, the faint, invisible, dry dust and acrid in the nostrils, we saw the long strand of iron gray hair. So this ironic ending. All of a sudden, we know that she wasn't alone. And the Negro is kind of representative of people moving away from the South. They sought life elsewhere. He goes right out the back door. I thought that was kind of great. So when we think about the symbolism, the title, The Roses in Emily's House, are dead. And so we can sort of see, right? Faulkner is really saying this is not what the South represents, right? This kind of black, acrid, old, worn out story of the rose, this kind of deadly rose. That's really what he's saying. This Southern culture is disappearing. When we start to think about the privilege and the mood of the whole thing, the symbols, we have this ongoing discussion about why these characters matter in the South and why some people were never going to come into the modern era. This sort of neoliberalism and this idea of the melting pot in the United States is there's places in the South that never stopped having that war, which we can really see now. So, major themes. And then what's on the midterm, right? So, there's 20 points of true false, there's 30 points of multiple choice, and the essay is 50 points. And you just want to think about referencing the story. If you don't have the actual textbook, you're going to want to reference the story in some other way, either say the section or whatever. Okay, so that's it. I'm excited for you guys, and I think that we're going to have an easy time on the midterm. Okay, good luck.